Black Hollow. Even the name sounded like a threat. The town was old, its roots sunk deep in the hard soil of the mountains. The houses huddled close as if seeking warmth from the chill that permeated the very air. Fog, thick and white, was a constant companion, clinging to the narrow streets. It was the kind of place where shadows moved unseen, where whispers traveled on the wind, carrying tales best left untold, stories of things that went bump in the night, and the people who wished they hadn't heard them. But the story that truly made the blood run cold, the one that sent shivers down the spines of even the most hardened soul, was the legend of the Golden Mask. The legend stretched back generations, a dark stain on the fabric of Black Hollow's history. It whispered of a gruesome massacre, a family butchered in their home, their blood staining the floorboards a macabre crimson. The Thorns, they were called, simple folk, a goldsmith and his kin. Elias Thorn, the patriarch, had been a master of his craft. He could coax beauty from the most unyielding metal, could create works of art that would take your breath away. But his greatest creation, a golden mask, a symbol of love intended for his wife, would become a chilling reminder of the darkness that lay at the heart of Black Hollow. For Elias and his family were found one morning, their lives extinguished as brutally as a candle flame snuffed out by an icy wind. The townsfolk whispered of dark forces, of ancient evils lurking in the shadows, but the killer was never found. And as the years turned into decades, the memory of the Thorn family faded, becoming another ghost story to frighten children around flickering campfires. But some wounds run too deep to ever truly heal. The Thorn family home stood at the edge of town, nestled amongst the gnarled oaks and whispering pines that lined the foothills. It was a modest dwelling, its walls built of sturdy stone, its windows glowing with the warmth of a loving family. But on that fateful night, the warmth had been extinguished, replaced by a chill that seeped into the very marrow. Elias had been away, traveling to the next town to sell his wares. He'd been eager to return, a small pouch of coins heavy in his pocket, enough to buy his daughter the new dress she'd been wanting. He'd pictured her face, alight with joy, and the memory of it spurred him on, even as the forest grew dark around him. He arrived home late, the moon a silver sliver through the trees. He pushed open the door, his heart light with anticipation, but the warmth that usually greeted him was absent, replaced by an unnatural silence. A cold draft slithered across his skin, raising goosebumps on his arms. The first thing he saw was the blood, a thick, viscous pool staining the wooden floor of the entryway. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the suffocating quiet. "Hello?" His voice was a choked whisper, barely audible above the pounding in his ears. He moved through the house, each step heavy with dread. The scent of iron filled his nostrils, the metallic tang of it making his stomach churn. He found his wife in the kitchen, her lifeless eyes staring into eternity. His children, his beautiful children, lay huddled together in their beds, their innocence forever stolen. He collapsed beside their still forms, his cries swallowed by the oppressive silence of the house. His fingers traced the outlines of their faces, memorizing every detail, every freckle, every strand of hair. The fire in the hearth had long burned out, leaving only ashes and a biting cold that seemed to seep into his very bones. Section 3. Whispers of Vengeance. Days blurred into weeks. The townsfolk, their faces pale with a mixture of pity and fear, buried his family. Elias, hollowed out by grief, could only watch, his heart a leaden weight in his chest. He couldn't comprehend the depth of his loss, the gaping wound that tore through his soul. The sheriff, a kind man with weary eyes, tried to console him. "We'll find who did this, Elias," he promised, his voice gruff with emotion. But Elias knew in his heart that justice, even if served, would be a paltry thing. It wouldn't bring back his family. It wouldn't erase the image of their broken bodies seared into his mind. He locked himself in his workshop, the scent of metal and oil a familiar comfort in the face of overwhelming despair. He worked on, his hammer blows echoing in the silence, each clang a testament to his pain. He would find a way, he vowed, his heart hardening with a chilling resolve. He would have his vengeance. Section 1. A stranger arrives. The train rattled into Black Hollow, its arrival a jarring intrusion on the town's usual quietude. Detective Laura Mills stepped off the train, her breath misting in the cold air. She pulled her coat tighter around her, her eyes scanning the platform. She had been sent from the city, a fresh face assigned to a town steeped in old secrets. The sheriff, a grizzled man named Brody, had greeted her with a tired smile and eyes that held a lifetime of unspoken stories. "Black Hollow ain't exactly known for its warm welcome," he'd said, his voice rough as gravel. He'd led her through the town square, past the general store with its dusty windows and the abandoned church with its crooked steeple. The air was thick with the scent of wood smoke and something else, something indefinable that sent a shiver down Laura's spine. It was the scent of old secrets, she realized, of things best left buried. Section 2. Echoes of the Past. The murders had shaken Black Hollow to its core. 3 bodies in as many weeks, each one found with a single gold coin placed on their chest. The coins bore the mark of Elias Thorn, the town's long-dead goldsmith. "Folk are saying it's the Golden Mask Killer," Brody had told her, his voice barely a whisper. "Come back for revenge." Laura had scoffed at the idea. Ghosts and legends were for campfire stories, not police investigations. But as she started to dig into the town's history, she couldn't shake off a growing sense of unease. The Thorn family massacre had been brutal, their deaths shrouded in a mystery that had never been solved. She pored over the old case files, the yellowed pages brittle to the touch. The murders had been swift, clean, and efficient. No witnesses, no suspects, no motive. It was as if they had simply vanished, their lives snuffed out like candles in the wind. But there was something about the case, something about the way the victims had been arranged that sent a chill down her spine. It spoke of a rage that transcended death, a need for vengeance that time could not quell. Section 3. The Mask's Gaze. Days turned into nights, each one colder than the last. Laura found herself drawn to the Thorn family story, the tragedy of it echoing in her dreams. She visited the abandoned Thorn home, its empty windows staring back at her like vacant eyes. The air inside was heavy with dust and the lingering scent of decay, a testament to the violence that had unfolded within its walls. One evening, while going through the evidence boxes, she found it. A small wooden box tucked away in the corner of a storage room. She pried it open, her heart pounding in her chest. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a golden mask. It was exquisite, its features crafted with a skill that bordered on the supernatural, but it was the eyes that held her captive. 2 empty sockets, yet Laura could have sworn she saw a flicker of something within them, a spark of ancient rage, a thirst for vengeance that time had not diminished. For the first time, Laura felt a tremor of fear course through her. The legend of the Golden Mask Killer, once dismissed as folklore, suddenly felt all too real. Section 1. The Coin's Message. Laura examined the gold coin found on the latest victim. It was old, worn smooth with time, yet the inscription was clear. The Thorn family crest, a hammer crossed with a rose. More than a calling card, it felt like a message, a challenge. Each victim so far had been a descendant of the families who had profited from the Thorn's downfall. The baker who had bought the Thorn home for a pittance. The lawyer who had ensured the will favored the town rather than distant relatives. A pattern emerged, dark and deliberate. This wasn't random, it was calculated, a vendetta spanning generations. The more Laura learned about the town's history, the more she understood the simmering resentment that had festered beneath the surface. The Thorns, despite their talent and kindness, had been outsiders. Their skills envied, their success resented, and in their absence, others had been quick to capitalize on their tragedy. Section 2. Threads of Connection. She spent hours in the archives, sifting through dusty records, piecing together the lives of the Thorn family and those who had come after. She studied faded photographs, their edges brittle with time, searching for faces, for connections she might have missed. She interviewed townsfolk, their eyes wary, their words carefully chosen. Fear hung heavy in the air, a palpable presence that settled over the town like a shroud. Whispers followed her as she walked the narrow streets, whispers of the Golden Mask Killer and the curse that had befallen Black Hollow. Some dismissed it as superstition, but Laura saw the fear in their eyes, the way they avoided her gaze. She discovered that after the massacre, the town had prospered. The The Thorn family's wealth, their land, their very livelihood, had been divided amongst those who had been quickest to offer condolences, quickest to exploit their grief. A network of complicity woven so tightly into the fabric of the town that it was almost invisible. Almost. Late one night, Laura found herself drawn back to the abandoned Thorn Forge. The moon was hidden behind a veil of clouds, casting the woods in an inky darkness. She could hear the rustle of leaves, the snap of a twig, each sound amplified in the stillness, setting her nerves on edge. As she approached the forge, a cold wind swept through the trees, carrying with it the faint scent of wood smoke and something else, something metallic and sharp. She pulled her coat tighter around her hand instinctively reaching for the revolver at her hip. There was something here, she could feel it, a presence. She thought of Elias Thorn, the grieving father, the skilled artisan, his life shattered by an unspeakable act of cruelty. What had he become in the aftermath of that tragedy? Had his grief twisted into something monstrous, something fueled by an unquenchable thirst for revenge? As she stepped across the threshold of the forge, Laura realized she might be about to find out. The air inside the forge was thick with dust and the ghosts of forgotten fires. Moonlight filtered through the grimy windows, casting long, skeletal shadows across the earthen floor. Tools hung on the walls, their surfaces dull with rust, each one a silent witness to the tragedy that had unfolded within these walls. Laura moved through the space cautiously, her footsteps echoing in the stillness. A forge stood at the far end of the room, cold and lifeless now, its firebox choked with ashes. An anvil sat nearby, worn smooth by countless hammer blows. The place felt heavy, burdened by a sorrow that time had not diminished. She ran her hand along the surface of the anvil, her fingers tracing the indentations left by years of hard work. She could almost hear the clang of hammer against metal, the hiss of hot iron plunged into water. This place had once been alive with creation, a testament to one man's skill and passion. Now it was a tomb haunted by the echoes of a shattered life. She stopped, her senses on high alert. There was a faint sound coming from the back of the forge, a soft scraping like metal against stone. Her hand tightened around the revolver, her pulse quickening. "Hello!" she called out, her voice echoing in the emptiness. "Is someone there?" The sound stopped, the silence stretched, taut with anticipation. Laura took a step forward, then another, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The air was heavy with the scent of iron and something else, something acrid and unfamiliar. It smelled like fear. She rounded the corner of the forge, her flashlight beam falling on a pair of worn work boots sticking out from behind a large piece of machinery. They were caked in mud and dust, and they looked as though they had not been moved in years. Laura's breath caught in her throat. She was not alone. Slowly she moved around the machinery, her flashlight beam trained on the figure huddled on the floor. It was a man, his back to her, his shoulders slumped as if under an immense weight. He was dressed in dark clothing, his hair long and unkempt, his body thin and wiry. "Sir," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Are you all right? I'm Detective Mills." The man didn't respond. He remained perfectly still, his head bowed, his hands hidden from view. Laura took another step closer, her finger hovering near the trigger of her revolver. "Sir, I need you to show me your hands," she said, her voice edged with a nervous tremor she couldn't quite suppress. The man slowly lifted his head, and Laura gasped. His face, or what she could see of it, was gaunt and pale, his eyes sunken deep in their sockets. But it was the mask that truly sent a shiver down her spine. A golden mask, its features frozen in a silent scream, covered the lower half of his face. The mask. Laura had seen it before, felt its cold metal in her own gloved hands, stared into its empty eyes. But seeing it now, on the man before her, brought a chill that cut deeper than the night air. It was no mere craftsman's creation. It hummed with a power that seemed to emanate from the very metal itself. "Elias?" she breathed, the name escaping her lips like a prayer. The figure stiffened, the single word piercing the silence of the forge like a hammer blow. He turned slowly, the moonlight catching the golden mask, reflecting it back as a grotesque grin. For a moment, neither of them moved. The air crackled with tension, thick enough to choke on. Laura's hand tightened on her revolver, her finger hovering near the trigger. But even as her training screamed at her to defend herself, another part of her, a small, persistent voice, whispered that this was not a criminal she was facing. This was a broken man, consumed by a grief so profound it had twisted him into something else. Elias took a step towards her, then another. His movements were slow, deliberate, almost mechanical. The moonlight glinted off the golden mask, momentarily obscuring his eyes, but Laura could sense them on her, burning with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. "You bear the mark of their sin," Elias rasped, his voice hoarse as if unused for years. Each word seemed to cost him immense effort, dragged up from some dark abyss within him. He lifted a hand, pointing a gnarled finger at her. "The blood of my family stains your hands." Laura fought to keep her voice steady. "Your family was murdered, Elias, just like the others, but killing won't bring them back. It won't ease your pain." "You think I don't know that?" Elias roared, his voice echoing through the forge. He slammed his fist against a nearby workbench, the sound sharp and sudden in the stillness. "I live with the pain every waking moment. It's a fire that consumes me, burns me alive from the inside out." Inside. He sank to his knees, the golden mask tilted towards the ground, as if the weight of it was suddenly too much to bear. For a moment he seemed smaller, less menacing. The moonlight caught the side of his face, revealing a flicker of something akin to pain in his eyes. "They were all I had," he whispered, his voice breaking. "My Mary, my children. They were the sun in my sky, the warmth in my heart, and they were taken from me, slaughtered like animals." Laura lowered her gun, her finger easing off the trigger. She could see the raw grief in his posture, hear the anguish in his voice. This wasn't the monster the town whispered about. This was a man drowning in his sorrow, clinging to vengeance as the only thing keeping him afloat. "I know you're hurting, Elias," she said softly, taking a tentative step towards him. "But you're not alone. Let me help you." For a moment she thought he hadn't heard her. Then, slowly, he raised his head, the golden mask turning towards her. In the faint moonlight, Laura could have sworn she saw a flicker of something new in those empty eyes, a flicker of hope. Elias hesitated, a tremor running through his frame. The fire that had blazed in his eyes, the fire of vengeance that had sustained him for so long, flickered uncertainly. Laura's words, spoken with such quiet conviction, seemed to penetrate the darkness that had enveloped him, echoing in the hollow chambers of his heart. He looked around the forge, his gaze sweeping over the cold forge, the dusty tools, the ghosts of happier times that lingered in every corner. Memories, sharp as shards of glass, flooded his mind. His wife's laughter, the warmth of his children's hugs, the metallic tang of creation that had always filled him with a sense of purpose. A sob escaped his lips, a raw, guttural sound that spoke of years of suppressed pain. He clutched at the golden mask, his fingers digging into the cold metal. The mask, once a symbol of his love, now felt like a chain, binding him to the darkness, suffocating him with its weight. News of Elias's death, and the truth of his torment, spread through Black Hollow like wildfire. The townsfolk, their faces etched with a mixture of relief and a strange, unsettling guilt, gathered for a funeral pyre, consigning the golden mask to the flames. The fire burned long into the night, casting flickering shadows against the stoic faces of the onlookers. Laura watched the flames consume the mask, a strange sense of closure washing over her. The curse, the whispers, the fear that had haunted Black Hollow for generations seemed to dissipate with the rising smoke. But she knew deep down that some scars ran too deep to ever truly heal. The town had been built on a foundation of secrets and lies, and the echoes of those sins would continue to reverberate long after the flames died down. She had glimpsed the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of Black Hollow, the capacity for cruelty that resided in every human heart. The legend of the Golden Mask Killer would live on, a cautionary tale whispered around flickering campfires, a reminder that vengeance, however justified, exacted a terrible price. And in the years to come, Laura knew that whenever she looked at a piece of handcrafted gold, she would remember the man behind the mask, the artisan turned instrument of vengeance, and the town forever marked by the curse of the Golden Mask.